Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Is Hers, the space where women share their real stories behind becoming themselves, finding their voice, taking risks, and building their lives on their own terms. I'm Yev, and today we're hearing from a woman whose journey has taken her across countries, cultures, and communities, guided by deep curiosity about how people grow, connect, and create meaningful change. My guest today is Nicole Bogott, a founder of Philia and the Philia Association, an organization dedicated to helping people intentionally shape their lives through reflection, accountability, and community. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, nice to be here.
Nice to see you here. So for those meeting you for the first time, how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I would say that hello, I'm Nicole. And I'm very driven by the question, how can we create environments that help us to work better together? I think that is what drives me. And that is the underlying question that kind of helps me to create the projects that I create or the books or other means that I'm working on.
So Philia grew out of a very personal experiment before becoming something much bigger. Could you tell more about the project and what problem it's solving today?
Yeah. So Philia basically came out of my own personal experience. So I'm my first user case, I would say. I'm a woman that is very ambitious and driven, and I always have many ideas and many goals and many things I want to do and experience in life. But if you have that, then sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming, and it can sometimes even be a bit confusing where to start, where are you in your journey. And I've definitely experienced that, especially as a young professional during university times or even afterwards when you're starting your career and you have a lot of personal and societal questions at you, what you're going to do next and how you're going to do that. And so one of the ideas that I always had was to team up with a friend and to kind of like check on each other. And I asked a friend of mine years and years ago whether we wanted to try that. And I think after our first attempt, we didn't really stick to it much because, again, like if you're super busy and have many different competing goals in life, it can be kind of hard to slot in a call with a friend. And we didn't have enough structure, so that kind of fell apart. But the idea was, I guess, born back then. Then a few years later, I was in a pretty demanding professional position as a country director of a political foundation abroad. And at that time, many people hired life coaches. So I saw that it was kind of like the hype of the time. And I wanted to try it because I wanted to see what that is like and what happened. You know, everyone talks about it. I wanted to have that experience. And it was okay. It wasn't bad, but it didn't blow me away because a few things were kind of missing for me. First of all, I didn't really feel like I could really measure if I quote unquote improved or what really changed in that time. That was like a 3 months experience. Second of all, I was kind of missing that exchange because, you know, when you have a coach, they're asking you a bunch of questions, but it's a very one-sided experience. And I kind of thrive off also hearing from the other person and where they are and what they are doing. And then also after, a 3 months period, you either have to sign up again or it kind of ends, but your life doesn't end, so your path continues and there are new challenges maybe coming. And I found it a bit unsustainable to have that experience. So I kind of circled back to this friend approach and I asked another friend of mine. And with that friend, I was a lot more intentional and we started creating more structures. So we had a 1-hour call each week based on a sheet that each of us filled in about like what happened each week. And even the call was like structured in different segments. And we knew like now it's your turn, then it's my turn. Now we have a little question about resonance, like does what I say get to you, so we really created a system around it. And that system is really the secret sauce of it all. And when I said earlier, your environment kind of shapes we need to create certain environments that allow us to thrive. This was, I think, a very nice proof to the test, that this is really what is required. And I've been doing Philia for many, many years with different people because the system is always the same. You don't need like one person to do it with. You can also, if someone wants to do something else, you can also find another person. And it has really grown into something much bigger from that personal experience.
Let's rewind a bit. What was your first big ambition?
Okay. My first big ambition. I guess something that has always been with me in life was, and I'm circling kind of back to that, is to understand how systems shape people. So I was born in the GDR, actually, that doesn't exist anymore. And I grew up in a reunified Germany. So I was always around people that have experienced very different systems. I mean, even take my grandma. My grandma was born in 1934. She has experienced even more changes throughout her life, different currencies, different ideologies, right? And so for me, I guess I have seen that change is kind of part of life, right? And depending on how you adapt to that change is whether or not you can also thrive or make an impact or partake, right? So I guess that's kind of like my background. And I guess ever since growing up like that, I have continuously put myself into new environments. And my very first, big goal, I guess, was when I was a teenager. I moved to the US on my own to finish high school there, to graduate there. And that was, I guess, my very first own attempt to put myself into a new environment with no one I know, where I had to be a complete learner and where I had to understand how to make something there on my own. And ever since that, I've just continuously reproduced that. And I think that's also largely what fuels and funnels now into my work with Philia, with the one-on-one that I've just explained to you, but also with my work in communities and in society, let's say.
Did you ever have an I don't belong here moment?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I mean, many. And honestly, like, I think an insider-outsider perspective is very, very valuable and cool. Because if you have an I don't belong here moment, it means that you can learn something. And yes, it also feels awkward because, you don't necessarily always know social rules, or, even the most normal things somewhere else can feel really weird to you because you have never maybe done them before, or even sometimes shopping for clothing, I mean, I'm thinking now, US, for instance, going back to my US example, when I arrived there, everybody wore hot pants. I mean, this is now many years ago. Now everybody even here wears hot pants, but where I was living, nobody was wearing that. So for me to wear that in public felt really strange at the time as my teenage self. But there everybody wore it and it didn't mean anything. Then equally, when I first went to the Middle East and, in certain countries, you have to wear a headscarf. For instance, I traveled to Iran. It can feel a bit strange, to wear something you haven't worn before until you get to a point where it doesn't feel as strange maybe anymore, whether it's the hot pants or whether it's the headscarf. Now that kind of comes to my mind, but that's just like an outside example, but there's many other examples. Yeah. When you feel out of place, where you can learn something new. I mean, now I kind of went to the clothing. What do you learn there? But it's kind of also like it's sort of overcoming, or I could kind of go on and on about that, but
yeah, it's a good example. I think it's a nice metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah. But it goes, of course, it goes a bit deeper than that. But yeah, I think that's just like an easy to understand way.
You spent a year in the United States as a high school exchange student. Looking back, how did that experience shape the person you became?
Oh, it changed a lot. Sometimes it is nice to go back to the origin story and kind of see what happened there that kind of then spiraled onwards. But so first of all, I think that was the first time that I understood that I was German. Not necessarily East German that much, but that I was German. And because, when you're at home the whole time, like you're just like a fish in the water, like nothing is different. But when you go abroad, you realize, okay, you look at your own country from somewhere else and you're realizing, okay, that's also how people see you. And you're a little bit of a representative for that country for other people. Or maybe even a little ambassador in some way, because people associate that country with you because they know you. And I was aware of that very early on, that I could set some sort of precedent even for where I'm from by the way how I behave or who I am, because that's kind of how people oftentimes operate, right? And we operate in stereotypes in some way. And another big thing, there were many big things, but another big thing was, for instance, to ask questions. So when I was in the US back as my teenage self, I had a math class with Mr. W. Mr. Wermerskirchen, which is a German name, but for Americans, Mr. W. And he did something that was also for my teenage self, very new for me. And he, probably in every class, he was like, you need to ask questions. If you don't understand something, you ask. And he was so welcoming and relaxed about people asking questions in a way that I didn't really experience that much in my high school life in Germany. And in my experience, having knowledge was always, and I think to a certain extent in society still, is kind of like a way to prove yourself, right? Like, you know something, you have knowledge, you have certificates and so on and so forth, and thereby people trust you. And yes, that is true, but to acquire knowledge, you need to also ask some questions, right? And that was something very profound for me, to ask questions. And even until now, if I have to navigate new systems, I start by asking questions, well aware that sometimes people think that you're kind of challenging authority when you're asking questions. It really depends on the context and how you do it. But it is a way of navigating and understanding and staying curious. So,
was there someone who modeled courage or self-definition for you, or someone who didn't and it still shaped you?
So when I lived in Afghanistan, I was in touch with many women, and a lot of them leaders in their own right. So some of them students maybe at the time, some of them artists, some of them wanted to start a business. So women really from different fields of life. And I have to say that if you live in an environment that's so hostile in many ways, but you still keep showing up and you still keep trying to make your dreams come true in whatever way, shape or form, I think that really impressed me, because I think for me, what basically courage means is that you are in a situation that you may not have that much control over, and you still manage a way of navigating in whatever way or shape you can find in that moment. I think for me, it's one thing, for instance, for me to decide I want to go to live in Kabul for a year or whatever. That for me, to be honest, is not that courageous, because it is a choice that I make. And every day I could decide to get on a plane and fly somewhere else, right? But if you are living in a certain environment and you do not really have much choice, I think that is a different type of bravery for me. And I often always had to think back also of, people that are drafted into war, for instance. That person for me has a very limited scope in a way. So if they then have to overcome something that they don't necessarily choose, for me, there you have to kind of come up with some bravery. Whereas if, you on your own choose something, that's also good and great, but I kind of compare the level of freedom that you have in the first place. So when I met many of these women speaking out despite all the threats, or trying to meet despite not being able to, or not being allowed to in certain ways, that for me is courage, and that for me is admirable. And yeah, so I guess that's how I would answer that question.
Yeah, I get what you mean. In the situation that is in general unsafe and people are showing agency where agency is forbidden, that's a rebellion and it takes courage.
Exactly.
What's a decision you made that changed the trajectory of your life?
Okay. I have to think of the scorpion. So I was stung by a scorpion.
Oh.
In the desert of Namibia by a parabuda, which is like the most poisonous scorpion in southern Africa. And I've never been stung by a scorpion in my life before that. Of course, like many people haven't. And after it stung me, I experienced a pain that I cannot describe. Like I experienced a pain that was overwhelmingly painful. I was in the middle of the desert. There was no doctors. There was no one around, and no one could also really help me. And I wasn't familiar with stings, so I didn't really know what that means necessarily. You know, can that be fatal or not? Or I didn't really know, but I was in excruciating pain for hours and hours and hours, and it wouldn't stop. And as I was laying there in pain, I was I was thinking, this was around New Year's actually. I was thinking, okay, if I die here, okay, now we're kind of going there. I was thinking, okay, if I die here in the desert of Namibia, some people may be asking my parents, so what did Nicole do before she, what happened? And then they will be saying, well, Nicole worked as a country director of a political foundation in Namibia, which at the time for my age, that was a very, I mean, I was not even 30 yet, right? So that was a very, like my career path was pretty straight up, I would say. I was in very prestigious environments, and that was a very cool position to have at that age, especially. And I don't know why, but my heart dropped a little bit at that time. And I was thinking, but I haven't even tried like all the things I wanted to do. I don't know why, but that kind of came to me, and that sort of set something free in me, like a sort of, I want to say like kind of like a fuck it attitude, for the lack of a better word, where I thought, okay, I'm just going to need to freestyle a little bit and like really try to achieve my crazy dreams also, like, yes, it's good to be on this career path, and I am proud of myself. And, I do think that being in institutions and working in institutions is important. And I do work also with institutions now. But at that time in my life, I thought, okay, it will make sense for me to to take a leap, like to really try something new. And even if it fails, at least you have tried it, So that was something that really changed the trajectory. Because I didn't at that time continue on this kind of like ladder, if you want to call that. But I was like, okay, I'm just going to freestyle a little bit. And you can always go back to the ladder in some way, right? Like, because you have your, you have your education, you have your networks. Yeah. So that really changed my trajectory.
Yeah, I honestly, I see that you're laughing, and I honestly also feel that there is like a very fun component to the story, because, you were sort of going in this linear, predictable, probably for you, predictable trajectory that was, maybe many things were clear enough. And then you achieved being stung by a scorpion. And after that, like, it's sort of maybe a little bit as a sign as you can actually do anything. Like you already done something that most people never get. So why not try? Like this is already crazy, so might as well try something else that is like from the wildest dreams.
Yeah, kind of. And something else that also really always stuck with me from this experience, and I learned later on that this is a bit like a bee sting. I mean, I think it hurts excruciatingly more than a bee sting, by the way. But it doesn't necessarily have to mean that someone, I survived it, obviously, but I didn't know at the time. But something that always bothered me, because you asked me earlier if I felt like I don't belong or something. And that experience is one of the few experiences that I cannot share with anybody. Like, I have met some people that were stung by like white little scorpions, and they were like, oh yeah, tickled a little bit, but not by that scorpion that stung me. And I'm yet to find someone, and it sounds a bit crazy when I say that, but that knows what that is, like I can describe it in some way, but no one really has experienced that or anything close or can imagine that. And that is a bit of a lonely experience. And that is something that I realized also afterwards. I cannot really share that with anyone. So that also, yeah, it's a bit strange, actually.
It's not very relatable, I assume. Yeah.
No.
So you lived and worked in several countries, including conflict and post-conflict environments. What did those experiences change in the way you see people and yourself?
Well, I am convinced now that in order to address or solve the very complex problems that we are experiencing in the world, and the security sector is one of the areas where, there's complex issues, you don't just go in there and then it's resolved. You need some sort of intelligence here. Same for climate change or other issues, and this is now on a societal level, but we need environments that allow us to better work together to overcome them, because I do not necessarily think that one person alone can resolve it. I do think we need good leadership. I think we lack good leadership. And I think people want good leadership. I do really believe that people want to follow, not blindly, but I think if we would have people that are charismatic and that can evoke something in us that make us want to follow, we would. But yeah, we need to create environments that allow for people to not to overcome disagreements, because I think disagreements are inherent in diverse societies, but to stay with uncertainty and disagreement long enough to learn something in order to arrive somewhere else. And I don't think we're doing this enough. This is now the societal level. But even if you break it down on the personal level, now coming back to my one-on-one Philia experience, like, life is complex. My life is complex and your life is complex and everyone's life is complex, especially for women, for men as well. But like, there's a lot of push and pull, like everyone's kind of pulling at you. And if you just alone in this, I think it's very difficult. But if you just have even one person with you or two people together, what I said earlier, it does unlock something in you wouldn't have on your own. And the same goes for, if you look at exponential bigger issues, it goes the same. We need to find better ways to create these like group environments. And I think right now what we see a lot is impulsivity, people acting on impulse and, not really staying in this observant state where you have to be in a way even passive to observe what's going on around you in order to have a sort of adaptation moment in which you need to change a little bit, or maybe the other people as well, so that you arrive in a state where you can collectively come up with something better. And I'm missing that. I do create that in some way in my work, but I think we need it a lot more everywhere with everyone involved. So, yes.
Your work brought you close to questions of democracy, politics, and power. Was there a moment when your understanding of leadership, and influence fundamentally changed?
So I've started or co-initiated a local initiative in my hometown in East Germany recently this year. And we had an event and we invited people from city administration, civil society, local politicians, and everyone who wanted to come to talk about ideas that we wanted to implement in that town. And something that I found fascinating is that, so we had like a little panel and we described like what we wanted to do. And then we gave the floor for questions. And, usually when you do that, people also give their like some sort of statements. And what I found super interesting is two things, I guess. One, I saw again how much we work in silos, each of these groups oftentimes work on very similar, maybe sometimes even the same issues, let's say ecological questions that they are all concerned about and trying to resolve, but they're doing it in their silos and they're kind of wondering why the others don't come when they present their work. And this kind of came out. They're like, yeah, but we presented it and no one was there. And then the other person said, but when we have our gathering, the people don't come. So that was one interesting thing, how there are these overlapping topics, even though we don't really realize it a lot of times. And then what I also find very interesting is that what I said earlier, disagreement isn't a bad thing. Disconnection is a bad thing, but disagreement can actually be super fruitful. So when they then started talking from their different perspective about, like, it was about ecological topics, they had some disagreements, but since they were talking about the same thing, I found that really enriching because you could see different angles from the same issue or different fears. And then that person had an answer. So I guess these are the two things that we need to really be able to engage with disagreement much better while staying in connection. And I think good leadership can facilitate that and should facilitate that a lot more. That's something that I've really been involved in on the local level. How can we create environments where these different silos come together and be in contact with each other? Yeah.
So what began as an accountability experiment with a friend eventually became Philia. At what point did you realize that this wasn't just helping you, it could help other people too?
Well, I guess sometimes when you find something cool, you want to share it and you want to tell everyone about it. So something that we started doing is to have to run pilot groups with the same structure. And we did that many times actually, right? Like to also improve the program. We got really good feedback from, we're mainly focusing here on women and they were all from different backgrounds. And the same goes also for the big community that we've built. I mean, I recently looked at the numbers because with the association, we had our annual meeting. And when I looked at all of the different numbers, like people from all of the different platforms that we're on, we actually have close to 25,000 people in our, let's say, orbit. And that was really interesting for me as well, how, sometimes you just continue doing what you're doing and, people come and people stay. Like something that is very popular. I'm actually having an event tomorrow here in Istanbul, our women empowerment events. So these are gatherings by and for women with our nonprofit association. And we bring together women from very different backgrounds. And because we have these tools that I mentioned earlier, we can create an environment where reflection and connection can take place in a quite an effortless way. And that's one of the ways how we build a community as well. And yeah.
What did you have to unlearn to grow?
One of the things, it's still hard for me to unlearn. Okay. So as I said, I kind of thrive on an exchange, right? Like, how are you doing? How am I doing something? Or working in a team or working in a group. So that really motivates me. If I see someone hustle, I hustle, like that gets me going. And oftentimes when people couldn't really hustle in the same way, sometimes you need to let go. Oftentimes before I was only looking at shaping the environment. I was like, okay, what do you need? Do you need this? Do you need that? What else can we do? But at some point, sometimes it is also okay for people to part and then other people to come. And this is really something that it's a balance between like, how much do you shape the environment for it to work for person X? And at what point, can you also say, okay, we're here. This is how we do things. You can stay. You can, yeah. So I guess that is something that I'm also still unlearning, to keep that balance between, keeping the integrity of the institution and of the organization while, allowing also to work with everyone. So that is something definitely.
You've lived in many different places and cultures. Has your sense of identity stayed consistent, or has it evolved along the way?
Yes, it evolved. Definitely evolved. And I think that is, especially for women, it's a very important learning that we are allowed to mature and to evolve and to, really get out of this state that sometimes socially we are supposed to kind of like stay in, I think there are certain tropes, especially for women, to like really stay naive and young and this girl or whatever. And to some degree, I think we have that in us, right? Like we have whatever where we come from is also part of us, but we can add more layers to that. And I think that is really freeing for us, that we can live in a day and age where we are allowed to mature and where we are allowed to, to add on to our past identities. I don't think we need to always stay where we were in our teens or 20s. Yeah, definitely.
Have there been moments when you felt pressure to be smaller, quieter, or more convenient?
Yes. Of course, I have experienced that. I've tried that, but it's really difficult to, to be like small and convenient and all of that all the time, especially, as I said earlier, if you have a lot of, like, I have a lot of energy. I have a lot of dreams. I have ideas. There are many things I want to experience and do and try. And, that is really goes against that big energy, really goes against the small package. And yeah, I've tried it. I think, many women have been at a time when they've tried that. And maybe for some people it also works. I don't know. But for me, yeah, that didn't really work out.
Did you do something specific to navigate this environment, situations, maybe some decisions that you made along the way, or you just sort of changed the environment and, moved along?
Well, I think that can be really difficult. And kind of going again to this, what I had to unlearn, I always want to take everyone with me. And sometimes, it doesn't work out. If, someone is saying, okay, you need to blend in just for the sake of blending in, conform and do everything everyone else does. That is a type of adaptation, because we talk about adaptation as well. That can be a bit unhealthy, I think, because you're really denying a lot of aspects of yourself. There again, we're talking about, does it come from you or from me, or is it someone else telling me? Like, I remember, for instance, a former boyfriend. I remember we were at an event. This is just one example of this. And I didn't want to, like, they asked if I wanted to drink something. And I said, yes, an orange juice. And then he said, Nicole, just get a drink and just hold it. Just hold it to fit in, so that. And I did that. I then got a drink and I held it, even though I didn't really want to drink. And I didn't, because it was early, it was early in the night. And I am a lightweight, so when I start drinking early and then everyone is still sober, that doesn't really work out. So if I want to drink something, if it's like a party, I need to wait a little bit till, the others are more at my state, and then I can join in, But these are things where you kind of like denying your own reality because someone else wants you to like look like you fit in. And I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that. That's just one example. I could give you many examples, but that's just one of them. Yeah.
Returning to East Germany after COVID seems like another unexpected chapter. What did reconnecting with your hometown teach you about yourself?
Oh, so much. I didn't really expect to stay in Germany for all that long, but when I returned, I realized by accident actually that my grandma needed some caretaking. And since I have been abroad for many, many years, I thought, now I have time. Now I can do that. I'm going to dedicate a year for Project Grandma. I called it Project Grandma because, I've never done anything like this before. And I know project management. So I thought, okay, I'm going to create my environment in a way that I can do that and I can resonate with it. And as I was there, I knew that it was going to take a long time because she had a lot of things. Like she was a whole construction zone from top to bottom, so there were many things and I knew it would take a long time. So as I was there, I was thinking, okay, I have all this skill set from my international development and international relations background. And why not, get more active locally on the ground where I'm actually from. And it coincided with the fact, basically, that there were many elections at that time. So there were the communal, European, federal, and state elections, all like back to back. And I actually started running for election because I thought, I guess now with all of this polarization and people being really unhappy with how things are going, maybe it needs more people to actually get in there and not just complain and like go out there and get involved. And something that has taught me with all of these elections was really, again, to look at the reunification process in Germany and what that means for East Germans, a group that I belong to, and how that has played out over the years and how the relations between West and East Germans are contributing in some way, maybe in other ways, not so much to the situation that we have right now. It's not only a purely German phenomenon that people are voting more right-wing parties. That also happens in many other countries in Europe. But there is something specific to learn about the German reunification process and what that means for generations like mine that are born into this change, but, are socialized still in like kind of this East German way, but have also experienced this new system very much. And, so it brought up a lot of identity questions and made me learn a lot more about where I'm actually coming from and why I went that path, because I found out that actually a lot of East Germans, especially many women, left, so what I've done actually in my area is very common, so yeah, I guess going back to the roots really has made me understand myself and my environment in a new way.
So how do you define success now versus when you started?
Whew. Okay, that's a bit plain maybe to say, but when I started, I really, really wanted people to understand what I was doing. And oftentimes people didn't really understand what I was doing. I really wanted like my family and everyone in my environment to understand, what I do and why and so on. And I guess I really ventured out there, and I guess certain things maybe will never be fully understood. Like the sting of the scorpion that I mentioned, maybe I will never meet a person in my life that has had that experience or that can really relate to that. So I think I kind of moved away from that to some degree to, I think first and foremost, I kind of need to understand myself what I'm doing. I think that is very important, because as long as I know like that I'm on my path and that this feels right to me and it resonates with where I want to go, that is kind of number one. And then to build a kind of like a team around it of certain people, maybe that person understands more that side of the thing. And then that person may not understand that side, but they understand something else, So to give you more practical examples, like this East German experience, for instance, like being in East German and what that means. Like some people will not really understand that. Or, living abroad, some people will never be able to relate to it. And I think I got to a point where it's fine, it's okay. Like we all have different experiences. I think it's an understanding that, if I know what I'm doing, that is good. And then have for different fields, have my people. So that's fine.
What's the bravest choice you've made?
Oh, I want to say one of the bravest choices was to say yes to my grandma in some way and to like set aside that year. It kind of threw me into a whole different environment. And, to take on a caretaking activity, it really significantly impacts you. Like it starts with the time. Of course, you have less time for a lot of things. You cannot perform in the same way. Your radius gets a lot smaller. There's a lot of trade-offs you have to do. And I think that was one of the first times that I was organizing someone else's life apart from my own life, which is really what that means. Like you organize all of the doctor visits, there's a lot of bureaucracy attached to it. Like when we talk of caretaking for an elderly person, that isn't necessarily maybe brushing their hair or something, what people kind of imagine. It's a lot of kind of project management skills that you need to bring up there, and you're navigating someone else's life. And it's again like a fine line. Like I'm younger than my grandma, obviously. And I want her to be as free as she can be and as independent as she can be. So I want to create, again, this environment for her to thrive. And, she's now doing like a daycare thing for older people. So she walks there in the morning. She says she's going to work. I mean, she's not working there, but, she sings there. She does sport there. She has friends. I mean, she is a whole new person. Like she goes shopping now, whereas before she couldn't see well anymore. She couldn't hear, she really made a leap from here to there. And again, like what I said in the very beginning, it was about creating an environment for her specifically that she can thrive in with people that, are resonating with her on that level. And I think it was brave in a way because it was completely foreign to me, that whole world. I had to, again, like understand it because I needed to make decisions for her. And I really felt the gravity of being her caretaker. Like you have a real responsibility and you don't want to also do things that are against their will. At the same time, they cannot understand all of this bureaucracy, like impossible. Like it's impossible for her. She couldn't do it, and then there's also like a certain emotional strain with that. Like, for instance, I visited a friend of hers with her. So I'm her driver as well in some way. And, seeing older people, it really touched me that other elderly lady has to manage a lot of things on her own, and she clearly needs more support. It has a psychological effect as well. And, you are dealing with, like, I wrote my own, what is it in English? Like in Germany, you should have papers for if you are incapacitated in the hospital, what should happen, what happens with the machines and all of that. You know what I mean? And I was thinking, like, I cannot just put these papers in front of my grandma and be like, hey, grandma, here, maybe you should fill that in. I thought, I'm going to do it myself first. I'm going to fill in my own because I could trip and have an accident. Anyone can have an accident and end up in a hospital. And it's very detailed what they ask you there. And I did it for myself. And it really was weird. And I think sometimes we think, oh yeah, you should fill this in, grandma or grandpa, but you do it yourself first, and then you see, like, when you're confronted with these kind of decisions, yes, you can change them. I can change my paper, but it is strange to think about the end and to think about, not being able to be everywhere and do everything yourself. Like, how do you want to live then? Yeah, those are areas that you don't encounter every day.
Yeah, it's tough. How do you make decisions when you don't know how things will turn out?
Oh, I like to kind of go by my intuition and look at different paths. So what I usually try to do is I'm going to first try to think of all the options, also the ones I know I don't want, like all of the options that I can think of. So that takes me away from having to make a decision. First, I go into option modes. From one side to the other side, I try to think of all of them. And that is already a very good exercise because you cannot really make a decision if you are not facing all the options available. Staying where you are, changing only that thing, da 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 da. And then I kind of try to understand, okay, what would be my immediate outcome? Like if I have like these different options, option number one, okay, what is the immediate outcome if I go that way? How would other people react? And what's the ultimate outcome? Like maybe, and I do that with all of them. And then once I think about that, that already gives me a little bit of an idea where it makes sense for me to go. That's my exercise.
Yeah, I do the same. I love it.
Yeah.
I think you just like building a projection from every sort of option sort of allows you to make a more informed choice in the end.
Yes. And also, sometimes you think you have two options, but maybe you have five.
Yeah.
Even if you maybe not want them, but you have them. And having options is nice.
Yeah.
Having options is good.
What grounds you when life feels chaotic?
My friends, my cat, people. Yeah. So with Philia, we have something called the emergency call. So if it's very chaotic and I feel like my monkey mind is on, and I feel very impulsive and I can't help myself, like that is a moment where I feel like, okay, impulsivity, I think is always a sign to stop. Intuition is something else, but impulsivity, especially when you don't feel very good about it. And we have this emergency call structure. It's really good. Like you ask your Philia partner or friend. I also asked other friends before if they have half an hour because they also need time. If I'm coming with something, I understand that they also have a life and they also need to make time for something to come. And then in that half an hour, we split it in 3 parts. Part number 1, 10 minutes venting. So that person that's calling is venting. That's already nice, right? 10 minutes. You need to time it. Otherwise, venting goes forever. Second part, pep talk. So the other person gives you, based on your venting material that you provided, in good faith, gives you a pep talk. How you're doing great in this situation. That's already nice. So you have a 10-minute showering yourself with a pep talk. And then 10 minutes, next steps. So in the last 10 minutes, it's both of you like being more conversational. So what could next steps be? Again, like kind of looking at different options. Sometimes the next step is doing nothing. Sometimes the next step is doing something, maybe taking a bath or whatever. And sometimes you need a permission slip to do something or nothing, from someone else who's in good faith, with you. But yeah, so
Philia is built around reflection and agency. Has that practice changed the way you relate to yourself?
I don't know if it has changed how I relate to myself, but what comes up to me is also that by understanding my own agency and how important that is, especially, when it comes to making decisions or being in complex situations, it helps me to also remind myself that other people have agency. And I think that is sometimes even more important, and especially in the day and age we're in now, where we have a lot of disconnection from people, or we see people that maybe are voting for a different party or are having a different ideology or whatever, like seem different from you. I think it is important to also, see that they have their agency and there's some sort of reasoning behind the way that they are also. And sometimes it's important, to see that part first before you then go into all the details why someone thinks X, Y, and Z. Yeah, I think that is something that helped me. And also, when you have a Philia partner, you get to know that person's very, very well, in an intimate way, in a way of like sharing very vulnerable things. And, some of the things are also, because it's another complex person, are also things that are new to me, and it helps me to be wide and to create space for many different realities or many different ways of seeing the world, or even sometimes my Philia partner is changing her ways, or I'm changing, or sometimes we go back, hey, look, 3 years ago that happened and now you're doing that. And I see that in myself and in her, and I know that it's possible for everyone. And I really do believe in lifelong learning as an undercurrent. And going back to my math teacher there, that always says ask questions. I do believe that everyone can learn all the time, even when you're older. Or, yeah, my grandma, look how her life has changed from here to there. So I give that also I want to be even better at giving it to others, I guess. Yeah.
For someone listening and feeling stuck, what's one thing they can do today?
Move, walk, go outside. Somewhere I read recently, don't believe any thought that you had inside or something like that. And I think there's something to that. I need to test it a bit more, but I'm in Istanbul right now. And Istanbul is a city that's very walkable and beautiful, and walking and being outside. And I think it does something to you, to feeling stuck. I do think it makes you unstuck. Move. Like physically try to move if you can. Singing is good. Karaoke. Go alone if you must, or do it on your phone or something. I don't know, like get moving.
What do you think other women should know about?
That we're cool. I think women are cool. Just believe that you're cool. It doesn't matter what others say. That's it.
What's one puzzle piece you've collected along your life journey that changed everything?
Ultimately, we're all the same. It's very simple. I think ultimately people want the same things. People value similar things. They call them differently. And patriarchy is everywhere. It doesn't matter where you are. Like some things are a bit universal. So.
What's the next chapter you're stepping into?
I want to build more, as I said, like I want to build more environments where groups can come together and, create intelligent solutions for complex problems. I think that's really what's at the heart of what I'm interested in, like whether people are from different sectors, whether people are from different backgrounds or different nationalities, to really push for, the idea that adaptation is not a one-way street. Yes, when we go somewhere, we have to adapt, but also the environment needs to adapt to us. It's not enough if I go abroad that only I like tweak and turn. It's also if someone new comes, also that environment needs to create a space for that. And I think that is what's interesting to me, like this mutual adaptation process between people so that we can connect better, so that we can create better solutions as groups and work on things long term and overcome these, let's say, disagreements by staying curious. That is really something that drives me. And I think it's totally possible. Sometimes I think, like, why are we so here? Why are we so here? Like, we could be somewhere completely different. And I think it's totally doable. I don't even see why we're stuck. Like, I think solutions are out there. We just need to get started. So, yeah.
Where can people connect with you or your work?
People can read my books if they speak German. People can reach out to me if they want. They can reach out to me on social media, on LinkedIn, for instance. They can also check our websites. They can come to a Philia meetup in their city if they want. They can start Philia meetups so that they can create the environments to bring women. In that case, like we're mainly focusing on women in the meetups together. If you're a guy, you want to bring men together, we can talk. If people want to work with me on creating better environments for people to work better together and to have better collective intelligence, they can do that. So, yeah.
I will share all the links Nicole provided to the episode description so everyone can click and see.
Mhm.
Who would be the woman you'd love to hear on This Is Hers and why?
I know many amazing women. So I can give you a list of people. I can give you a list of women that have already done amazing things and ran amazing campaigns, changed laws and whatever. But since you're asking me right now in this moment, I'm actually right now staying in an apartment of my friend in Istanbul, and she is an expert on Sufism in Afghanistan, Annika Schmedding. And I think you should talk with her. She's amazing. She's super intelligent. She's super empathic. And she's also one that is in between worlds and very much has this insider-outsider perspective. Someone else I find very interesting that I've been following recently also is Katja Hoyer. So she also has an insider-outsider perspective on the East German cause, but she lives in the UK. And she writes from there, which is really interesting because when I left the UK, because I used to live in the UK, she came. So, and yeah, I find people interesting, I guess, that have this insider-outsider perspective, that have had some sort of exposure. Doesn't need to be always to live abroad. It can be also in certain fields, coming from one professional field and going to another, or it can be any one of those.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It will definitely resonate with anyone who wants to build a life with more intention, deepen their relationships, and find the courage to create change, maybe for themselves and maybe for other people too. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow This Is Hers on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or our social accounts. And also, please leave a comment. It helps us reach more people who need to hear these stories.